Welcome to the Worth Knowing live stream on the Cliff's Edge channel on YouTube, the Worth Knowing Substack. That's my Substack. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on Twitch. Sounds like I'm hawking Spaceballs the cereal, Spaceballs the flamethrower. Speaking of throwing flames, it really felt like there were flames coming out of President Donald Trump's ears over the last few days. I know there's a cottage industry in media of declaring a single moment as Donald Trump's downfall. His comeuppance has come. It's his doom. And it's got a Lucy in the football feeling to it, right? It's like John Oliver. It's like, we got him. Did we, though? Never really quite pans out that way. So I'm not trying to do that. I'm not trying to say that somehow the events of the last few days are leading to the end of Donald Trump, or that he's finally getting what he deserves. Oh boy, what does he deserve? But I do want to make a case that there's a common thread running through the weekend's news about how reality has come and smacked our president in the face and how he's struggling to come to grips with it. It's almost like the description from the movie Almost Famous of a mid-level band struggling with its own limitations in the harsh face of stardom. Donald Trump is certainly very mid as a thinker, and he's gotten by his whole life on bluster and hype and repetition of snarled talking points, and all of that can work in politics. Eventually, demagogues just manage to grind people down until they intone, "The leader is good, the leader is great, we surrender our will as of this date." Reference, please. I'm looking for that in the comments, by the way. But look, in the harsh face of reality, of actually holding power and having to make real world decisions, it all comes to a screeching halt. And what we saw over the Memorial Day weekend, again and again, was a chasm between the stuff that Donald Trump sends flying out of his mouth hole and the reality that the world doesn't work like he pretends it does. It seemed, especially on Ukraine, where he's having a "I'm shocked to discover that Vladimir Putin is evil" moment. On Gaza, where he discovered that Benjamin Netanyahu is just like him and will do anything, even pursuing a war that his own people no longer want, to preserve his own power and to keep himself out of jail. It seemed like on trade with Europe, where his threat of a new 50% tariff on the European Union lasted less than 48 hours, it was like a Buster Douglas heavyweight boxing title. On all of these, it began to seem that he was letting the mask down just a little bit, like this mingled sense of befuddlement and outrage that maybe he was being played for a fool was beginning to come out. And by the way, that "played for a fool" thing, that's actually not my words. That's from Politico. That's their assessment, that was the biggest worry on his mind, that maybe he was getting played for a fool. And by the way, on the fourth issue, because I did promise a tetrad of issues, building a new nuclear deal with Iran, it seems like he's already gone through the 5 stages of grief and realizing he was wrong about Barack Obama's nuclear deal with Iran. And now he's just desperately trying to come up with some face-saving difference that he can slap on it to make like he's not scrambling to get right back to Obama's deal. So look, we could certainly talk about some other Trump weirdnesses from the last few days, like his bizarre commencement address at West Point, where he rambled about drag shows and trophy wives and a staff worried about dementia. We could talk about his pardon of former Sheriff Scott Jenkins, who was convicted by a jury of accepting $75,000 in bribes. But we're going to hold off on that. Maybe we'll get into it later. Actually, maybe our friend Cliff Schecter, I don't know, he was teasing me with this. I'm not sure. He was hoping to pop in and join us. And you know he's all over issues like that. So I'm going to save those. What I want to do is I want to talk about those 4 critical world issues and the ways that Donald Trump is trying to deal with the fact that he's just been dead wrong about them. And he's desperately hoping no one will notice. There's literally on earth almost no one better to talk about this than Dan Perry. He is the former Middle East editor for the Associated Press, also lead for AP coverage in Europe, Africa, and the Caribbean. He is the author of the outstanding Substack Ask Questions Later. Like me, he's a columnist for Newsweek. Dan, welcome to the live stream.
Happy to be with you, Matt.
It's a pleasure to have you. We're making a little bit of a cottage industry of this. I'm referring to cottage industries a lot these days. Like, that's still a thing. Apparently, that's what Donald Trump wants, is he wants to send us all back to screwing in widgets on assembly lines. I'm making a cottage industry out of having reformed members of the media, eminent members of the media on this live stream to talk about what's going on. Mark Jacob last week and you this week. So I want to hit you right up front with my thesis statement here, which is there are these four issues that maybe I'm inappropriately tying together a little bit, but that there's a through line among them, that Donald Trump is sort of coming face to face with the harsh reality of reality, and that all of the stuff that he spouts out of campaign talking points, out of his screeds, all of his illusions about Vladimir Putin, that they're all coming up against reality now. That was what kept occurring to me as I was monitoring the news over the weekend. What do you make of that, just as a starting point? Were you having the same set of thoughts? Was there a different kind of leitmotif connecting things for you?
Well, great minds think alike. I would say in this case, I had similar thoughts, but slightly different, because I can't take that seriously anything Trump says. When Trump says nonsense, I don't even know if he knows it or doesn't know it. I do suspect some capacity issue as part of this equation. Did Trump really ever believe he's going to buy and own Gaza? I mean, it kind of looks like he doesn't expect to be called out on bullshit, and he assumes that his base, which is all he cares about, will forget about it. And he also assumes, like, if it's provably false a day later, I think he also assumes that greater than the sentiment that one must speak the truth among his base is the idea that when he talks absolute rubbish and the experts are offended and shocked, they enjoy the fact of that offense more than their fidelity to whatever might be the truth or might not. So this whole landscape is so toxic and so laden with mendacity and nonsense that, I don't know, to approach it with regular, like, journalistic tools and, to speak of what he really expected and whether he's gotten a comeuppance strikes me as inadequate, because we're dealing with, like, the seventh dimension of gobbledygook. On the four issues, sure, not one of them has gone the way Trump apparently thought. Now, the tariffs, it doesn't even matter what he thought, because it's clear he doesn't understand tariffs. So he wheels out his idiot spokespeople to tell the American people that tariffs are a tax cut for them. Now, there's no way you can spin that. That is pure, unadulterated, 18-karat bullshit. And they say it. So can I really speak of their surprise when it turns out to be wrong? I don't think so. It's just, I think it's meant to be ridiculous. I don't know. Pick one of them.
Is that part of the point here? Is there's so much. I do want to break down each of these four things, because you really are a world-class expert on each of them. And so I don't want to hold out on people too long. And I will mention, because I teased it, I'm being teased myself. I don't know if Cliff is popping in or not. I'm in a mystery box on it, but he said, I know. He said he might be. And I know he wants to talk West Point. So hang on toward the end. I'll text him while we're on here.
But West Point is delicious. I mean, oh my God, the trophy wives thing. Where did it begin? The idea that this is the president of the United States, who, by the way, has one. It's just absurd. I live abroad, and I can tell you, people look at this. A small minority might think, well, it's comic or something. But I think we'd rather find our entertainment elsewhere. Like, it's great to be entertained. It's maybe not so great, but human nature to sort of laugh at idiocy. But you don't want any of that with its finger on a nuclear button. And right now, like, there's like 4 or 5 different dangerous buttons that finger is on. The whole hand is on a bunch of buttons.
You're making me think of, like, some demented piano player. All right, I'm gonna let you pick from this. Like this. I have to decide: is it a tetrad, a quadrad, Maybe the nerds out there can set me straight on this.
I would have said quadrad if you asked me.
You want to say quad? Well, you are the former Mideast editor for the AP. I'll let you decide because you've written about all of these. I think your most recent piece on these 4 issues was about Ukraine. Do you want to start with Ukraine or do you want to start on a different one?
Sure. Let's start with Ukraine.
Let's start with Ukraine. Your most recent piece was titled "Putin is making Trump look like a chump." And what we're referring to here over the weekend, Trump apparently kind of got emotional. That's Moscow, by the way, ribbing him, saying, seemed like Trump got a little emotional. Like, ooh.
By the way, in Britain, where I used to live when I headed Europe and Africa for AP, tired and emotional actually is a euphemism that means drunk.
That's really
in press reports about Winston Churchill and others of that ilk.
Oh, that's spectacular. Well,
and Trump, what he specifically said, apparently he doesn't need the alcohol for the same effect.
Yeah, well, I mean, Trump never does. But so what he specifically said was, quote, "I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people. And I don't like it at all. Something happened to this guy." Goes on to say, "I've always had a very good relationship with Vladimir Putin of Russia, but something has happened to him. He has gone absolutely crazy." So Dan, you probably noticed, I don't mean to sound as flip about this as I just was, that Vladimir Putin has been like this for a long time. He has been killing innocent people. Yes, in Crimea, in Ukraine, which is, that includes Crimea, in Georgia,
in China. Probably his own civilians, 20-some years ago when he was faking terrorist attacks in Moscow. It's ridiculous.
So why did you
write? Assassinating journalists and former allies and political rivals and every conceivable kind of murderous skullduggery. And to say that we've always gotten along with such a person who has that record is, again, I mean, how could you? How could the president of the U.S. say
so? Why did you write that Putin is making Trump look like a chump?
Because he is. Look, I mean, if there's one thing Trump doesn't like, I have to think it's looking like a loser. Because he's a guy who goes on TV and says, "I don't like soldiers that were captured," to explain his disdain for John McCain because they're losers, right? I mean, or casualties of war on the American side are losers. Unbelievable. So he doesn't want to be a loser. Well, he kind of looks like a loser when Putin tries to organize. Well, when Putin suggests 2 weeks ago negotiations on a ceasefire in Turkey, the Turks agree and invite everyone. Zelensky shows up. Trump says, "I'm essential, obviously, so I'm thinking of going." And he said this while licking the boot of the Gulf leaders in the Middle East. And then Putin just doesn't show up and sends B team or the C team. I mean, you look like a chump, basically. Then he said he's going to talk to Putin. Nothing's going to happen until I talk to Putin. Again, not so cool because that's going over the head of Zelensky. It's he wants to be on a par with Putin, but not Zelensky because the Ukraine is too Mickey Mouse for Trump. So they're going to impose some solution. He has this call with Putin. Nothing happens in the call. Convinces him of nothing. And this is in a situation where the background is during the whole campaign, he was rubbishing Biden for allowing the war to happen because if Trump had been president, it never would have happened, right? And then he would solve it on day one. Now,
he also said that Putin was a genius for launching the war.
Implied that, yes. And he also said that Zelensky was a dictator, completely giving a pass to the actual dictator in Moscow, as opposed to the elected and quite popular still Zelensky. He didn't end the war on day one, and he clearly had a plan. And that plan was to freeze the lines where they are, with Ukraine with Russia controlling Crimea and parts of the 4 other provinces known as Donbass, and a land bridge between Donbass, Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea. And he figured he could strong-arm Zelensky into agreeing to this, and moreover, handing over, critical minerals on top by threatening to end aid and intel sharing. But Putin, it turns out, wants more. because in September 2022, the Russians held fake, sham, bullshit referendums in these 4 provinces in the state of occupation, and this is held by a country that falsifies elections like you have breakfast, uh, and possibly more often. By the way, I mean I don't really have breakfast at all, uh, and they didn't capture all the provinces, so Putin wants Zelensky to not just accept the land he's lost in war, but to hand over more.
Mm.
And there's well that's even beyond the power of Trump to like he knows he'd look like a loser if he agreed to that. So it's not working, and it doesn't seem like Putin is in any way impressed by Trump's obvious political need to find a success somewhere. And Trump has that need to happen somewhere. The other issues you mentioned, for sure. That's why in the tariffs he so trumpeted the so-called deal with Britain. So yeah, he looks like an idiot, and he looks like he's in a pocket of Putin, and it's not a good look. And despite perhaps Trump's challenge with the truth, I suspect he knows it, and I suspect it's embarrassing, which is why he's at least pretending to be mad. And that was his statement
Right.
today.
It does bring to mind that infamous meltdown in the Oval Office with Volodymyr Zelensky in the infamous trap meeting, and the fact that when JD Vance went on his pre-programmed screed, he was saying, "Well, you hold none of the cards, no cards for you, you're cardsless." That seems to be the position that Trump is waking up and discovering that he's in. And this is
No,
per
but
the
see,
Wall
this
Street
is
Journal,
I.
in this piece from Annie Linsky and Alex Ward and Josh Dawsey. Trump is now, what are his options, really? What cards does he hold? They're terrible. They're really, really weak. So one option is that he's, quote, eyeing new sanctions on Russia later this week, but has yet to make a final decision. Of course, given how much credibility he's burned through on tariffs, the entire world knows that sanctions, tariffs, actions, whatever comes out of Donald Trump's face hole, it's transactional, it's meaningless, it's ephemeral. The other option seems to be he's floating the idea of walking away. Well, what does that mean? What would walking away constitute? Does that mean walking away from peace talks or walking away from Ukraine altogether? And then
I mean,
you have the upcoming NATO summit in The Hague next month. And what is Trump going to be able to strong arm our European allies into doing? Is he going to try to realign with them? Is he gonna flop back in that direction? So tell me what you see. What cards does Trump actually have to play here? And again, I don't want to make a game analogy when we're talking about war and peace and death in Ukraine, but what are his realistic options, and what is he going to do?
My conclusion, let's not bury it. My conclusion is that on all 4 issues, well, on the 3 geopolitical issues, Trump actually has things he can do if he was willing to use American power, like the tough guy that he would have us think he is. But time and again, we witness uh, events that suggest he isn't. And he's almost close to a pacifist. He doesn't want to get involved in confrontation and in war. He wants to sound that way, but doesn't want to pay the price of it and doesn't want to do it and doesn't want the headache. So on Ukraine, he can't walk away without it being, he can't passively walk away. Walking away is active because the U.S. is a participant. The U.S. is keeping Ukraine afloat. If he walks away, Ukraine will lose the war unless the Europeans really step up, which I think they will try to do, right? People talk about numbers and how much it costs. It's all meaningless because if I told you, Matt, give me $5,000, you probably would try to resist. A lot of money. But if I told you, give me $5,000 or you die, I would have my money.
But if you told me
The
to give you
Europeans,
$8 a month to become a paid subscriber to ask questions later, I would say yes, which I have done, by the way, and I urge other people to do. Sorry, that was our ad break in the midst of a serious point. I just thought
right,
something about Trump, some cheap commercialism was really on point.
You can get it for a fraction of what I'm actually trying to extort. No, I mean, he can walk away from Ukraine. He has greater leverage on Ukraine than on Russia because the sanctions, Russia has ways of evading the sanctions by finding markets uh, in China and India and other places that constitute half the world. So yeah, it's the leverage on Russia is not that great unless you want to go to war with Russia. Leverage on Ukraine is massive,
Mm.
which is why Zelensky is marketing himself all the time, and he's a great marketer, and he's got this brand with the military getup that so offended the journalist and the Oval Office. Um, they need political support in the U.S. to create pressure to prevent any U.S. president from walking away from them. And if that should happen, then as I say, the Europeans will have to step up, and I think they will. Um, that's what he can do. Now he clearly doesn't really want to do that because even after he did post Oval Office suspend intel and aid for like a couple days, basically, he restored it because he knows it would look terrible if he completely lost Ukraine, and that was the narrative. So he's in a difficult situation, and I suspect that at the end of the day, there will be a territorial deal. I'm not advising it or recommending it. I think the right thing would be to massively compensate Ukraine, not with NATO membership, which is weirdly meaningless because NATO can support Ukraine without its membership, but with a fast track to the EU and to
Mm.
have the Europeans put aside all these quibbles about the conditions. They're in no position to set conditions at this point. Their house is potentially on fire, and they need to put out that fire. And Ukraine will be a great addition to the EU. So if the EU can tolerate Romania and Bulgaria and the rest of Eastern Europe, they should take in Ukraine post haste. So there's a deal to be done that largely I think goes through Europe. I suspect the Ukrainians would agree to forego the land already lost. It's terrible. It's terrible to appease a dictator and to reward aggression. And a way to square that circle, I think, is to continue to punish Russia. In other words, have them do the deal, but have, as part of the international deal, Russia suffer the consequences, including no return to the G7, formerly the G8, and so on. So Trump, the Ukraine is tough. I'm not saying it's an easy one to fix. It's ridiculous to have claimed he can fix it on day one, but I think that was a statement that was meant to be a standard issue garden variety campaign lie that no one was meant to believe.
All right, I'm going to give you. I'd love to keep going on Putin, and I've written about this in Newsweek. I know you have as well.
He's fun, isn't
And
he?
it's a fascinating, it's a fascinating thing. If people are really, really bored and nerds, and you want to spend 10 minutes on a fascinating Google rat hole, Google the 2018 Senate Intelligence Minority Report. It's from Senate Democrats on Vladimir Putin's worldwide war against democracies, and evaluate the question for yourself: did the Cold War ever truly end? Because Vladimir Putin is very much at war with us and with our allies, at least the people we used to treat as our allies before President Trump. And we're right in the midst of it. It is just mostly not a shooting war that's affecting our soldiers, but it is a very, very real war. All right.
The Cold War was never a shooting war. Interestingly, I was based in Eastern Europe when communism collapsed, and I was frequently in the Soviet Union as it was collapsing, including just after the coup against Gorbachev. Uh, there was always a question about whether what followed the Soviet Union would be friendly towards the West, and there was an idea that they would be. And under Yeltsin, that idea thrived, but there was clearly discomfort with it inside Russia and within the KGB, now the FSD. And what we got wrong is we assumed
Mm.
that the party in Russia that would like to reestablish a Cold War and be hostile towards the U.S. and the West is the former communists. We didn't realize that there was a different beast lurking within. Part of it mutated from the communist, which is local imperial nationalists. In a
Right.
way, the opposite of communism, which was meant to be universalist. Communism, for a long time, had kind of two heads, and we only saw that one head. And when communism went away, the former communist, he was a KGB agent, Putin, became maniacal Russian nationalists trying to reestablish their empire, and it wasn't about an economic system. We kind of missed that,
And
but it's
I
pretty
was
clearly
partly bringing this up because you've written not just for Newsweek, but on your own Substack on Ask Questions Later. You've written recently a lot about Romania and the election there, and I don't want to get into all that. I want people to actually read it. If you're interested in what's going on and the various pieces of the worldwide, I don't know, it's the successor to the Cold War. It's the Dark War, I think is what I called it, the worldwide assault on democracies and freedom, led by Putin. Check it out and read Dan's piece on Romania. So I want to give you dealer's
Let me just
choice
give a
here.
teaser on that.
Oh,
Here's
please
the thing.
tease me.
Romania
You're not as
faced
good
a
as
binary
Cliff,
choice.
but you can tease me.
Do we go back to be Russia aligned and turn our back to NATO and to the EU and to the West? Now, there was a candidate that wanted to do that, and for a time he was ahead in their runoff where you have two candidates, George Simeon. He was supported by the leader of the free world. The leader of the free world, Trump, supported the enemy of the free world in this election. Now, this is the infuriating, contradictory, and absurd reality that we deal with. And that an American patriot would support that leader is astounding, unless you hate the free world. And unless you really buy America first means America only.
Or unless you're highly transactional and you're a member of the Trump family and you are over there touting support for far right-wing groups and for crypto companies that have been previously sanctioned by the US Securities and Exchange Commission, and you're in bed with all of these creepy dark web crypto illicit enterprises and you're getting enriched by them. Look, all right, I'm going down a rabbit hole here. I want to give
billionaires might become enriched by it, and anyone who owns a piece of Trump coin potentially could, although I do believe Trump coin competing with the coin of the realm is an impeachable offense. But the average American patriot who voted for Trump thinking that's America first is going to find that it means America's last in line when it comes to economic growth, because this turning your back to the world is no way to prosper.
All right, I'm giving you dealer's choice. We're going to hit 4 issues. Today's show is 4 places Trump just found out he was absolutely dead wrong. I'm treating this like back during my old radio hosting gig where it's like we're halfway down through the hour and we're talking with Dan Perry, former Associated Press, Middle East. I don't need to give this because we're live streaming, but people are constantly spooling on. So we are talking with Dan Perry, former AP editor for the Middle East. And we're talking about 4 places Trump just found out he was absolutely dead wrong. We've just talked about Ukraine. We wanted to talk Iran. We wanted to talk Europe. We wanted to talk Gaza. You've already alluded to you're an absolute expert on all 3 of them. Where do you want to go next?
Well, I would say the Middle East. Very interesting. He assumed that Netanyahu was his lackey, essentially. And he would do what he says. He didn't realize he'd have to really deploy force. He also assumed incorrectly what would happen if he gave Israel carte blanche to rain hell upon Gaza. Okay, so basically he let Netanyahu resume the war. He took away the restriction on blocking humanitarian aid to Gaza, which I fear is a war crime. And he spoke of unleashing the gates of hell. So, even more bombs, whatever. It's been 2 months. And not only is that nowhere close to completion, but Netanyahu's coalition would fall apart if the war ended, because the far right that controls the fate of that coalition doesn't want the war to end. So he misread everything. He thought Netanyahu wants to win the war. Netanyahu wants to stay in power. So in order to change this paradigm, massive pressure needs to be applied on Netanyahu and also on Qatar to apply similar pressure to Hamas. Because 2 things need to happen here. One, Hamas needs to agree to not just step aside, but disarm, because you cannot have a jihadist militia, in the shadows controlling whatever future normal Palestinian government of Gaza might arise. And you need to force Israel to understand that they're not going to occupy anything and they're not going to take land from this already small bit of land as punishment, but they're going to let the Palestinian Authority reestablish its control, which is, by the way, by international agreement that Israel agreed to in the 1990s. But it would need reforms. It would need assistance. The Arabs are ready to bring in $100 billion Arab countries, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries, UAE, Qatar, uh, to rebuild Gaza, but to change everything. And they're willing to even put boots on the ground and to even take part in the pacification of Gaza. But Hamas would need to be disarmed. So this massive package needs to be presented to the Palestinian people, saying if Hamas is gone, a whole new thing, and renewed discussions with Israel on the future where you have some version of independence and such. That would bring down the current Israeli government, which is bad for Israel and opposed by most Israelis. Uh, Netanyahu has to be made to take that chance. And there's a really simple way to do it, because the opposition in Israel that would favor all this massively, knowing, of course, that in not doing it, Israel is also forgoing normalization, not only with Saudi Arabia, but quite possibly with Lebanon and the new, weirdly pragmatic government in Syria. Israel's leaving all this money on the table, and more people are dying, so Netanyahu can stay in power. Now, this is madness, and it needs a very big baseball bat. To mainly first to Hamas to agree to disarm, but they would under pressure from the Palestinians if it was clear what they're missing if this doesn't happen. Trump doesn't have what it takes, I think, to really, really force anything. So his attitude is we do a deal. And none of these guys, not Hamas, not Bibi, not Putin, and possibly not even Zelensky, are not really, they're not here to do a deal because they have their own ideals. Uh, for better or worse. I mean, Hamas's ideals are not, my ideals. But they have a craziness that is genuine. And they're not necessarily looking for deals. They're looking to kill Jews. And Trump, that short circuits Trump's brain. So he doesn't know what to do in Ukraine, and as I say, he can't walk away without this being an active thing. He can sort of walk away from the Middle East a little bit and let them all, wallow in their swamp. And he's looking to do a deal now with Iran. Now,
I want to get into that. I just want to drill down on something you wrote a couple weeks ago because it really lodged in my brain. There's obviously what needs to be front and center is the tragedy of what's happened largely in Gaza to the tens of thousands of civilians who have died there. And also, let's not lose sight of the 58 remaining hostages that Hamas is holding and the 1,200 people who were slaughtered in Hamas's October 7th attack. That is obviously front and center. The other thing that is tragic about Netanyahu's continued prosecution of this war and the way he's gone about it is that there is an historic opportunity that's getting squandered to reset onto a far better path, a far more peaceful path, and to sideline forces of terrorism and war and death. And you wrote about this. It was within the last 2 weeks. I don't have the date in front of me. You wrote, Israel is squandering its success in Lebanon. And I was hoping you could touch on that a little bit, because to me, that was part of a broader theme of, there's this opportunity that Israel created in Lebanon by destroying the leadership of Hezbollah. And there was potentially an opportunity to reach an agreement, including with the Saudis, that would have completely reset the direction of the entire region. And so if you could just touch on that for a second.
Look, I have my next article and ask questions later. Today was about Ukraine. Tomorrow it's about this. How Israel has a binary choice about continuing this thing that will indeed keep Netanyahu's coalition together, which benefits only the people in power, as we discussed before with who benefits from Trump's actions, or a total reset that will end the killing in Gaza, that will get back the hostages, that will get for Israel peace with Saudi Arabia and maybe Lebanon and Syria, and that has a real horizon for peace and prosperity. That they're not even exploring this, and this has been the case for a year and a half since Biden began to try to engineer it, is absolute madness. It borders on treason. Okay. Now the Lebanon bit of it is interesting. Israel really had success in Lebanon. I mean, they thrashed Hezbollah so much so that Lebanon finally was able to ignore Hezbollah's political arm and elect a president. They'd been without one for years, who is a pro-Western moderate who is committed to disarming Hezbollah, which, by the way, Lebanon is committed to by virtue of 1701, the UN Security Council resolution, and 1559. The entire world should be doing everything possible to maintain that political situation and to assist Lebanon. And also, Lebanon needs money. So if to the extent that it requires courage to actually go in and try to disarm Hezbollah, that they can encourage that courage by releasing these massive monies. The U.S. should, which are basically an escrow in the Gulf. The U.S. should be encouraging this, and Israel should not be getting in the way. What's Israel doing? Despite the end of that part of the war and in violation of the ceasefire agreement they signed, they are maintaining a military presence, a small one, but inside Lebanon and 4 strategic points. And they have their reasons, and the reasons are not nonsensical. I mean, yeah, it has value, reconnaissance value primarily, but it's devastating to the Lebanese government that we're asking to take some risks on everyone's behalf. I was on a panel in London with the Lebanese ambassador to the UK, and he was saying, I can't imagine why Israel's doing this. Don't they know that this is helping Hezbollah's narrative, which says that Israel wants to occupy Lebanon and only Hezbollah can defend Lebanon? Why don't they take the win? Is what he said. And this is a particularly dumb one, because this is not keeping Bibi in power. It's just this instinct to do damage, which the right wing in Israel, to itself, which the right wing in Israel seems unable to control. It's like that joke about, why did the scorpion, bite the frog or whatever it was.
The scorpion and the frog. It's in my nature.
It's in my nature. It's in their nature to not take the win. Yeah. On Iran.
It is baffling because, and we're seeing this a lot in the comments where people are saying, and I don't disagree. I don't disagree with it. People are saying Netanyahu is a war criminal, or he's certainly doing his best impression of one. But you can sort of at least construct a mental map to understand, like, well, he is another Trump. He is all completely narcissistic, self-serving, power hungry, and only interested in preserving his own power and his own position of not being a jailbird.
But the weird thing is,
you can sort of understand his behavior on Lebanon and the squandering of the opportunity to end Hamas as a threat. I had you on my podcast on Beyond Politics 6 months ago. You had written a piece on Substack which suggested, look, there's actually some light at the end of the tunnel here. There's a pathway here to sideline Hamas forever, get a ceasefire, get a peace deal, and actually move forward. I thought it was a really clever pathway forward, and it was real. You are one of the best sourced people in the Middle East, and so if you're saying it, it's real. It's a possibility, and he's completely squandered it, and it's just missing out on that kind of an historic future opportunity. Again, I'm not underselling the human impact of what he's done. That is still first and foremost the focus, what he's done in Gaza.
Well, let me one clarification. Please. We haven't, to completely squander means it's over. I don't think that's actually happened. Now, here's the thing. There is a theory that says that Bibi is prolonging the war because he fears for the survival of his coalition, and most people in Israel believe that. And I think it very well may be true. And if it's true, that is immoral, it's criminal, and it's treason, basically. But maybe not, because Netanyahu is not completely unintelligent. There is definitely, I think, an IQ distinction between Trump and Netanyahu. He must see that this business of preserving his coalition at all cost is leading him to a place where he will lose the next election, which has to take place within a little bit over a year. Whereas if he turned on a dime and did what I'm going to recommend tomorrow in my column.
Oh, we seem to have lost Dan there for a second, so I'm going to try to bridge. Oh, and he's back. All right. Good. We lost you for a
The
second there.
opposition
We
would,
lost you on the best tease possible. What I'm going to recommend in my column, ...
if he does what I'm going to recommend, which is basically that he turn on a dime and do this thing, the opposition would support him. The far right would leave. But if he played his cards right, the opposition would support him and give him like 8 months or whatever, and maybe even join a government to take some credit for it. It would change everything. And he might, I don't think he's going to win a Nobel Prize anymore, but he might survive in power. He might end up as the president of Israel, ceremonial role. He might get a plea bargain in his corruption and bribery trial. A lot of good things could happen to Netanyahu that would prolong his rule as opposed to end it. And I'm pretty sure he's smart enough to know it. If he isn't, he'll read my column, because I think they do, and then he'll know. I wanted to mention Iran before we run out of time.
You teased Iran a moment ago. Let's get to it, because that's part of the Hezbollah calculus, is that by so greatly degrading Hezbollah's capacity. I mean, what I mean is that they assassinated all the senior leadership. So they took out all the leadership of Hezbollah, and now there's a vacuum. Now there's an opportunity there, and it seems like not only is Israel busy squandering it, but this is the piece that again goes back to our theme: places Trump found out he was absolutely dead wrong. Donald Trump has been railing against the Iran nuclear deal like his bestie, Netanyahu, or the guy he thought was his bestie, for 10 years now. And it turns out that he is now hot on the trail of trying to basically put it back, but just say, but I did it this time. What is going on with this? Am I wrong that the deal that Trump is trying to put together is essentially Obama's Iran nuclear deal, Trump version?
You're not wrong. I think it goes back to what we said in the beginning, that he needs a win somewhere, something he can present as a win. And it also relates to the fact that walking away from the Iran deal was completely stupid. The arguments for walking away from the Iran deal were true arguments and kind of false arguments. The true ones were that it let Iran do its monkey business around the region, supporting Hezbollah and the Houthis and Hamas, and trying to control other countries and foment jihadist revolution everywhere. And it's true, it did. It did. And that allowed them to maintain their missile program so they can fire ballistic missiles at Israel, which ultimately they did. So Israel's unhappy with those imperfections. The verification thing, the second thing, you can always have better verification, but the Mossad and the CIA both felt in 2018, when Trump walked away from the deal, that Iran was complying. So the deal was with the mullahs that Obama did: we won't mess with Hezbollah and your other little projects, and we'll let you play with your missiles, and we'll let you stay in power, and we'll remove much of the sanctions. So we're giving quite a bit, but no nukes. Now, when Trump walked away from that deal, the bad stuff didn't change. The only thing that went away is the good thing, which is they weren't enriching uranium at a weaponization level, which is 60 to 80%. It's ridiculous. I mean, literally, it was purely negative, the outcome. And as a result, here we are, 7 years later, and Iran is a nuclear threshold state, understood to be weeks away from a bomb, should they want to turn that on. So this is really, really dumb. And going back to what was would be an improvement. But here's the amazing thing. The amazing thing. What we're seeing is not the art of the deal, but the art of the sellout, how to get suckered. Because Iran right now is so weakened by Israel's destruction of much of its air defenses, and by the thrashing of its proxies all over the region, including the Houthis, by the way, and by its economy being eviscerated, by the fact that clearly it's hated by most of its people, the Islamic regime, that Trump has leverage if he's such a deal maker. And if it was me, I would have gone to Iran and said, look, I'm going to attack you. I'm going to destroy your nuclear facilities. And if you complain, I'm going to hit your infrastructure, and definitely your government facilities. And I know some people said that they were eager to be sent underground into their own tunnels. Nonsense. They would have been overthrown. I would have set an ultimatum and said no nukes, but also no more proxies, no more chaos in the region. The Iraqi militias, that's over, because that's really, really messing things up in Iraq, this network of militias that Iran semi-controls, that are Shiite militias. All of it gone. And then maybe you can stay in power. Maybe.
I
Now,
want to hit
instead of
you
this,
with a
in other words, he
question.
could have got, he's in a position because of Iran's having been weakened already largely by Israel to have gotten the improvements whose absence was the reason why he walked away. I don't know what's going to happen, but right now I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing Trump, based on what we hear in public, who's kind of desperate for a win somewhere, who's going to try to present it as an improvement. Good luck with that. I sincerely doubt, given the way we're headed, that there's going to be an improvement, but versus the previous deal. But it would be good to resume the previous deal. Yes.
I want to hit you with a question that came up in the comments here. And I think this, first of all, this is one of the reasons I like live streaming. I've done radio, I've done podcasting. I like live streaming better. And it's in part because of all the comments that come in, which add to the conversation, add to the sense that we're all in kind of a big group chat here, which we kind of are. And also remind me that sometimes I make assumptions. We make assumptions as part of the policy or political conversation that maybe shouldn't be assumed. So we have a question here from someone whose handle is "you don't like my music," which, since I'm a curmudgeon about all forms of music, I presume is true. And the question is, why should Iran not have a nuclear bomb, but the other nuclear states should? Now, look, this is a position that I happen to hold. I happen to believe that Iran should not have a nuclear bomb, but it's a reminder that's not necessarily a given. What is the case for this as an expert on the Middle East? Why should Iran not have a nuclear bomb?
Nuclear weapons have such destructive power that we want to limit them, period, and B, we want to prevent them from getting into the hands of regimes that are A, not democratic, and B, potentially fanatical. Now, Iran wouldn't be the only one. It's very bad that North Korea has a nuclear weapon. It's not great that China has one, but China actually has a dictatorial but semi-responsible leadership who's not going to burn down the house. If you think you're talking to God day and night, and he might tell you to nuke Israel, you shouldn't have a bomb. There's a good case for saying Pakistan should not have a bomb also. So yeah, not every regime should have a bomb. No one has that right. Uh, it's true that the countries that acquired a bomb did it because they felt like it. But luckily, in most cases, Britain, the US, until Trump at least, uh, and Israel uh, could be trusted, and this includes the Soviet Union, to not start a nuclear war because they're rational. They have mutual assured destruction. Uh, that was a slogan back until the 90s. So, yeah,
Right, which is in itself kind of a special case of the term rationality, but there is some rationality to it. And I just want to say that again, I really welcome people who have comments to enter, that don't necessarily line up with some of my views, and I think that's great. I think that's one of the great things about this medium.
Absolutely.
Is bringing up issues like this. This is a good question. So who should have them? And I'll give you my little answer to this, and I want to use this to transition to our final piece so we don't lose it. I want to talk a little bit about the EU and tariffs, but I think it's a great question. It's a great philosophical question. Who should have nuclear weapons? And you might be right that the answer is no one. We have to deal with the fait accompli that nuclear weapons are owned and part of the arsenal of many countries, including, as you say, Israel, although that's never been publicly acknowledged.
I have a specific answer, actually,
Please.
Justifies Israel. Among the various, defenses of why a country might have a nuclear weapon, would be if it is a democracy surrounded by dictatorships that want to destroy it, that far, far outnumber its population and therefore the size of the army in conventional terms. If you are really in danger and you will be overrun and massacred unless you can threaten your enemies with a nuclear weapon, maybe you should have one. That was the rationale behind Israel getting a nuclear weapon. Israel now has 10 million people, but when it achieved nuclear weapon status in, I guess it was the 60s or late 60s, whatever it was, it had more like 2.5 million people. And that was a small fraction of the hundreds of millions of people in the Arab countries. Well, maybe I would suspect back then it was maybe 150 or 200 million. Now it's closer to 5 of the Arab countries that at that time were not at peace with Israel, were committed to its destruction, and had repeatedly tried to invade, and were eventually going to be successful. So, if you die unless you have one, then you should have one.
So This is most awkward transition ever because I know you've got a little bit of a ticking clock here on your time. I don't want to overextend it because you got to go soon. And we promised 4 issues. We've talked a little bit about the EU. I just to quickly update people, lest they missed it. This is from Politico. As the famous saying goes, there are 3 things certain in life: death, taxes, and Donald Trump rolling back his threatened tariffs. The EU and the US will begin new trade talks rapidly after Trump announced his severe 50% tariffs on imported goods from the bloc would be punted from this coming Sunday to July 9th. So this marks the shortest lived, like a mayfly of tariffs, the shortest live set of Trump tariffs ever. Some knowledgeable people, these are well-sourced people, you got to take my word for this, affiliated with Wall Street, have been cluing me into the fact that once again, behind the scenes, bond markets are having a little bit of a hissy fit at Donald Trump. And there are intelligent people in the room in the Oval Office, like Scott Bessent, saying, Donald, sir, stop this, please stop. Because you're going to blow up the entire world economically, notwithstanding the possibility of blowing it up nuclearly. So I would invite you to weigh in on this. The theme here again is Trump just found out he was absolutely dead wrong. He's been trying to crab walk his way back from the Liberation Day tariffs. The last time he got a severe spanking from the bond markets. What the heck, Dan? What the heck is going on here? How could he step back into this bubbling acid pool again, only to discover, oh my gosh, my toes have melted off? That was a terrible idea. Why did he not learn a month ago?
Maybe he's not that bright. I mean, he has a certain kind of brilliance, like that the schoolyard bully has. Like a bully kind of knows how people work and stuff, but they're not gonna cure cancer. Okay, I think Trump is like that. He kind of knows how to manipulate people in their weak spots, but he doesn't know how tariffs work. Okay, and that's why he can say something as mind-bendingly idiotic as taxes are the most beautiful word in the dictionary. Uh, Look, it has to be conceded that globalization created amazing wealth all over the world, but it did hollow out the industrial part of Western economies because labor is cheaper over there, and half the time it's slave labor, and in any case, it won't stay cheap. So as China and Vietnam get richer, their stuff it'll become equally as expensive, but you've lost your industry. So I have some sympathy for people who want to push back on globalization, who want to strong arm industries into coming into repatriating, including their production facilities. It's not illogical, but tariffs have been proven to be like a boomerang. It doesn't work because you absorb counter tariffs, and the philosophical notion that a trade deficit is ipso facto bad is infantile. I mean, I have a trade deficit with Amazon, and it's because they have shit that I want to buy.
Oh, someone literally put that in the comments earlier. Sorry that I missed it. Yes. And so you're going to tariff Amazon, and that'll show them. That'll learn them.
So, but if I do, that just means that I'll pay more for Amazon's products because it's you who's paying the tariffs. So if I could build, I could bind the book myself, and that would cost me a lot because I live in a a high cost labor economy, or I could buy it from Amazon. If I tariff Amazon, I would pay the same, and it probably wouldn't be as good. So it's idiotic, and it was very much a consensus among global economists when the U.S. in the early 1930s had a massive tariff policy, the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, and it deepened the global recession, turned it into a depression because everyone counter tariffed and economies everywhere tanked. So no, don't go there. But the trouble is, economics is a little bit wizardry, and it's also complex, requires math. Trump clearly doesn't understand it. So I don't know. I think you kind of need enough people shouting at him, so eventually it backs down. Luckily, the markets reacted, and I think he kind of hates it when the markets tank. So he'll find an elegant way to back out of it, which will be to pretend like they came crawling to him and they said, "Oh, please, sir, do a deal," and it is some deal, and a deal is basically a restoration of the status quo ante-Liberation Day, and the whole thing is a complete con job. It is pitiful and pathetic. And honestly, I don't know what to make of, upstanding American citizens that don't see this bullshit for what it is.
On that delicious note, I want to do three things. First, I made you a promise behind the scenes that you could scoot out a little bit before the top of the hour, because believe it or not, Dan Perry is very, very much in demand for his international expertise, and you've got to go. So I am going to give a quick shout out to Ask Questions Later. It's one of my recommended Substacks. So if you subscribe to me, you're going to see it among your recommendations, or you can search it out yourself. Either way is fine. Go through Worth Knowing. I, of course, would like to ask for everyone to subscribe to me, but I would also like you to subscribe to Dan Perry. So Dan, I'm going to let you go, and I'm going to give a programming notice, and I'm going to give a little screed, picking up on your last point. But if you want to scoot out of here, I support you. Go do your important work that you do.
But I got to thank you for having me on. It's not even work. This is so much fun. Have me on again.
I love these live streams. I'm telling you, this is the best time I have all week. All right. Thanks, man. People, I hope will check out Ask Questions Later. And I'm booting you. I'm going to boot you for you.
I would recommend your Substack, but the viewers already subscribed. So
we hope so.
What I recommend,
we hope so.
Yeah. Is there a paid tier? Because if there is, they definitely.
There is a paid tier, and it's funny you should mention. So I'm going to get into that. I'm going to get into that in a second, but I'm going to boot you so that you don't have to feel rude. You can just go do your work.
I got to get on another.
You'll be 2 minutes early. All right.
Thank you, Matt.
So the other thing that I wanted to promise up here was an update on Cliff. I'm not making this up. I'm going to actually read Cliff Schecter's text. I know a lot of you are Cliff Schecter fans. You came to this live stream because of Tony Michaels or Cliff Schecter, and he just texted me, "I'm sorry, I didn't make it. I'm glad you left it a little ambiguous. I just couldn't get there." And then he texted me. He's like, "I really thought I could make it to the last second." Then he's like, then like half an hour went by. Then he texted me again, like, wait, sorry. I actually thought I could make it this time. Anyway, Cliff is tied up. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to guilt trip the heck out of him for next week. I'm going to guilt trip him. I'm going to make him come and do one of his little pop-ins. Let me leave you with two quick thoughts before we wrap up for this week. One is Dan was right. He was trying to do me a solid here by setting up the idea of paid subscriptions. Thank you to all of you who have become free subscribers. I mean this sincerely. I really mean it. Free subscriptions are great. They help me, and I hope they're giving you content. I hate that word. It's like gray goo content. What does that mean? I hope it's giving you written pieces and videos and podcasts and the kinds of information that I promote from other creators. I hope it's giving you something valuable that you like and you find is additive and that is worth knowing. That's why I named my Substack Worth Knowing. I'm also about to put on a push to try and add some more paid subscribers. Turns out Substack wants to incentivize all of us to get more paid subscribers. They will give us an algorithmic boost if we hit certain benchmarks of paid subscribers, and I am shooting for that. So if you are finding these experiences worthwhile, please go to worthknowing.substack.com, and I would super appreciate. I just recorded welcome videos for free subscribers and paid subscribers. You can get to see those if you subscribe and if you do paid subscription. I'm starting to add chats. Paid subscribers can start their own chat links and other content. I'm trying to gear all that up. All right, that is my commercial. I'm done with that. Let me close out on this. I'm going to do a little bit of a. I just want to pick up on Dan Perry's point that it seems like Donald Trump's reasoning when it comes to tariffs is that the opposite of one thing, if you don't like one thing, you do the opposite, right? It's like George Costanza. I will do the opposite. I don't like globalization. I don't like what trade has done. So I'm going to destroy trade. I'm going to cut off my nose to spite America's face. That is the solution. That is, of course, idiocy. That is idiocracy. And that seems to be Trump's entire approach to everything. I think there's a connection point here to another item that was in the news all weekend. And no, not talking about trophy wives and West Point and all that. definitely in the news. I'm talking about Harvard. So I went to Harvard for graduate school. And I used to feel really, really awkward about it. And I felt so awkward about it that I used to act really weird about it. So people would ask me where I was in grad school, and I would do all this like, I'm in Cambridge. Like I wouldn't want to say it out loud because I was afraid that it made me sound like an ass, until I realized, and this goes to show that not everyone who goes to Harvard is that bright. I realized that doing all of that actually made me sound like an ass. And the problem was partly imposter syndrome, which I definitely had. There's a joke at Harvard that everyone spends the first 6 months trying to figure out how the heck they got there. And the rest of their time, they're figuring out how the heck everyone else got there. Because, like I said, Harvard is full of a lot of, so-so people. But it's also full of a lot of freaking geniuses, like amazing, amazing people, amazing opportunities. And eventually, I got through to the fact that, what was really going on wasn't just the imposter syndrome. It was, I don't want to sound like an elitist. I don't want to sound like, braggy. I don't know. I didn't want to sound like that because I'd already picked up on what Dan was just talking about, that there is a schism in America between elites and everyone else. And Donald Trump has picked up on one side of it. And he's essentially, everything he's doing is sticking his thumb in the eye of the elites and saying, see, all my MAGA people, I'm doing it. I'm serving them. I'm really sticking it to that crowd that you don't like. And there's something very real behind it. One of the most fascinating studies that I've seen in years was an economic study of congressional districts. Let me see if I can give you the setup on this. What these economists did is they showed the congressional districts that had felt the greatest effects of trade, of globalization in recent decades. The biggest negative effects, job loss, depressed wages. What they found is that if those congressional districts were already left-leaning, they moved further left. They tended to become Bernie Sanders kinds of districts. If they were already Republican-leaning, they moved further right. They tended to become Trump districts. The point is that the underlying cause, the underlying driver is the same. The political reaction to it has been to push us kind of to the poles on the spectrum of American politics. It's been to kind of radicalize our responses. And it's because the underlying problem is real. It's severe. And it's really hurting a lot of our fellow Americans. But the key is the reaction should not be, well, let's punish the people who are doing okay in all of this. I mean, to be clear, if you're already upper income and have above average education, you've been thriving in general, on average, in this economy over the last 30 or 40 years. It's been very good for you. If you're not, it's been a disaster for you. But the solution is not to get rid of Harvard. And that's really ultimately what this entire assault on the Ivy Leagues is about. I mean, yes, look, some of it is about the runaway campus protests. I grew up half a mile from Columbia University. I practically grew up on the campus. That's another one that makes me sound like an ass. I used to try to work around it. It's like, well, I'm from a small island off the coast of North America, which is true. It just happens to be Manhattan. And things got out of hand at Columbia. But Columbia is also responsible for incredible scholarship, for advancing the ball on American science. And Harvard definitely is, and Dartmouth is, and Cornell is. The Ivies are. I just wrote a piece for Newsweek, which you can find on Worth Knowing, that Donald Trump is lobotomizing America. I truly believe it. That's what this all amounts to, is he's identified an enemy for political purposes. The enemy is us. The enemy is anyone who is a scientist, who's smart, who's a lawyer, who's a doctor. We're going to go after those guys. They're the ones to blame. Oh, and also immigrants, and also China. And the problem is there's some truth. Immigration has had overall a downward pressure effect on wages. And yes, there is truth that the global trade regime, which isn't really the fault of either political party, the global trade regime has hurt vast swaths of Americans. But the solution of cutting off your own brain isn't a particularly good one. Anyway, I wanted to pick up on that because that's where I think Dan was going with this tariff thing. And I cross promote Ann Kim, a friend of mine, another longtime Capitol Hill staffer like me, who has a great Substack, and I just put out one of her videos. One of the things she's been talking about, she's an economic policy expert, is Donald Trump's entire vision for tariffs and for trade seems to be he wants to make Americans go back to screwing in widgets in factories again. That seems to be his whole idea of what it means to make things in America. It's not. That's not where we're going. That's not skating to where the puck is going. It's to be much smarter and to keep pushing the frontier forward and investing in science and research. And yes, supporting our institutions of higher learning that are the envy of the world. And so I object. I object strenuously. Of all the things that I'm angry about when it comes to Donald Trump, and there are many, many of them, it's this very basic thing of this war on our brains that just sticks in my craw the most. I'll leave on this thought. I was the chief of staff for Paul Hodes, a recent guest on this live stream, and he was running for the U.S. Senate against Kelly Ayotte, now governor of New Hampshire, then running for U.S. Senate. Bad year to run for U.S. Senate. It was 2010. Turns out, being a Democratic member of Congress, as Paul was, the worst profile possible to be running for any kind of office. And so we got kind of creamed. But we got into this debate with Kelly Ayotte, and she delivered one of the most pandering lines I've ever heard. She said, I don't think that I'm any more qualified to be a senator than any of you. I don't think I know more than anyone else. You sure wouldn't want to hear that from your airline pilot as you're getting into the cabin, right? You sure wouldn't want to hear that from your surgeon. Expertise actually matters. Knowing something about economics, having good judgment matters. This is why, by the way, I hate our setup of debates. Hate political debates. Performative, kabuki nonsense. Kabuki theater is actually great. Kabuki nonsense, not so great. That has nothing to do with how you govern. I mean, we just came off an episode where we were talking about the Biden controversy and the fact that it was maybe a hubris that the people around him thought that they could support him and help him govern, and they could kind of make it through, even as he had some diminished capacities. The truth is, anyone worth their salt in government relies on smart people around them, collective decision-making, knowing how to weigh different pieces of information, to have good judgment. So what was said about Harry Truman, a guy with a second-class intellect, but a first-class temperament. And so expertise matters, smarts matters, our institutions of higher learning matter, and Donald Trump is lobotomizing America. He's going right after the experts, the nerds, people who know how to do math. You look at the cuts that he's instituted across all of the agencies. Where does he go first? He goes to the personnel at the National Nuclear Security Administration who are overseeing our nuclear weapons, the scientists at the Agriculture Department fighting bird flu. He goes to the experts at U.S. health agencies doing biomedical research. He gets rid of the people who just collect data on issues from drug use to education to maternal mortality, lays all of them off. All of the people who are sort of the intellectual vanguard of America, that's where he's going after first. And I don't mean to sound like an elitist. I'm not elevating their importance above anyone else in America. I understand the economic frustration and anger. But the solution is not to go after this valuable part of our society that creates so much value for the rest of us. So, okay, that was a complete unplanned rant, and I delivered it in part because Cliff stiffed me and stiffed us all. And I wanted to give a little placeholder for the time that he couldn't be here. So I'm going to guilt trip the heck out of Cliff to put in an appearance next time. Thank you for all of the comments that are coming in. I haven't been looking at the comments all along the way because I was mid rant, but I really appreciate it. I appreciate all of you for being on the live stream, for commenting so actively, for being a part of this. I really love doing these. So thank you to Dan Perry. I'll once again say, if you have it within you, to make sure you've subscribed to Worth Knowing. And if you feel like you want to become a paid subscriber, I deeply appreciate both. And I am really looking forward to next week. So we will see you all next week. Have a great week. Let's hope that Donald Trump continues to discover yet more things where he was absolutely dead wrong, and take good care of yourself. See you in a week. Bye-bye.